Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric, if you didn't know. Today, we're going to touch on a number of topics that you guys in the comments have brought up. And one is, what do you do with your used waste oil and contaminated gas? Long-term storage. What's the best way to do it? Your additives. What works, what doesn't work? And lastly, what do you do with all the old machines that you seem to accumulate? And up here, I call it the boneyard. So let's start off with the first topic, and that's any shop of any size is going to encounter. And this goes for you homeowners too. And you guys that are doing this as a side hustle where you're retired and you're just doing enough to keep yourself busy and make a few extra bucks, you can fall into the homeowners where you're not doing enough volume of changing oils and stuff to see where you get a lot of it. What I can tell you is here in New York, part of the DEC code book, Article 23, Title 23, says that any facility that sells over 500 gallons of oil per year must take back used oil to be recycled. And that includes your AutoZones, your Napas, I would think like the service department at Walmart. Those places are required to take it back. But for those of you like us that we do a lot in a year, it starts looking like, well, what's the best way to get something not so much for free but cost effective? And that's a used oil furnace. Now, with the used oil furnace, you can burn, it's got to be a light mixture, where if you got contaminated gas with the oil and you put it into like a 500 gallon holding storage tank, if you don't have a lot of used gas that's mixed with oil, the waste oil furnace will work just fine. A lot of times what we get up here is, because we're in the North Country, so, people that are clearing land, what have you, they're looking for something that they can pour onto the brush piles to get them going. That's another option. Just be careful with it, because I've seen a friend of mine where he was pouring it on the brush pile and walking back, and it followed it was real hot out that day, so there was a lot of fume, but it followed right back and burnt his arms. So be real careful with that. And where would you see that? The gas and oil mix. Well, the biggest way, we just got one in here a couple days ago, and that was a DR walk behind. Brush cutter, mower, you can have all the attachments for the front. But what had taken place was either the failure was, because it was predates the electronic solenoid that just shuts it off, the fuel off, when you turn the key off. It didn't have it. So it either was a needle seat or a float or both that failed, that allowed the fuel to keep coming down through from the tank, and it'll start filling that bowl, and then it's got to go somewhere. And a lot of times, if one of the valves are open, it'll go right into the base. If they're closed, it'll get in front of the head. And what we call here at the shop deadheading is you have fuel in there and the piston can't go anywhere. But that's where you're going to see a lot of your gas oil mix. Because once we pulled the plug on it, the first thing I did when I saw it was I pulled the dipstick to see if there's any oil in it. and you could smell the gas in the oil. So it was one of those deals of, all right, let's get it up where we can get at it, and we'll drain the system and go from there. Now, what we've done in the past was, because one of the things we do, if it comes in and it's not running, we drain the fuel. You know, whether it's good or bad, we drain it into containers. And they're 5-gallon containers. And what I've done in the past with that is, you know, how a lawnmower engine or a 2-stroke engine runs in comparison to a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder is quite different. What I found here is the gas that I've taken out, because I'll use the 4 or the 2-stroke mix, and the gas that's come out of my customers' machines, I've used that fine in one of the old farm tractors that we have. It runs fine on it. Worst thing it'll do is foul a couple plugs. Well, other than that, we've had really good luck, and that's where most of our used gas that has no contaminants, like there's no, with the DR, that's a little over. So that would just get dumped into the oil. If I've got the older 2-stroke or 4-stroke, just straight gas, again, I use that in a farm tractor. So that brings us to long-term storage. People have asked me, what is the best way to store equipment for long periods of time? And I'll start off with the battery. The batteries that we're seeing today from Walmart, Tractor Supply, they are not holding up like they used to. We've tried bringing them in where it's warm. We've tried putting trickle chargers in here where it is when they're warm. And none of that works. You get a hit or miss. So what we started doing in the past couple of years is just simply taking one of the terminals off the battery and leaving it right in the machine. So if you got a riding lawnmower, just take the positive post off and then leave it off until you're ready to use it again in the spring. Fuel. As I've said before, fuel does not do good over long periods of time, especially the fuel that we have of today. So, you know, kind of keep in mind as you're getting towards the end of lawnmower season that you need to be aware that that gas may not be any good come spring. So to top it off with fuel, it's not going to help you. So what we do here at the shop and what I recommend to our customers is if you're going to get ready to do a long-term storage, first of all, invest in an inline fuel shutoff. They're like $4 or $5. They're lifesavers. And from your line from your gas tank to your carburetor, just cut it somewhere in the middle that's easy accessible where you can reach it with no problem. And with simply cutting it and sticking one end in the other end, you now have, and put your clamps on, you now have a way to shut the fuel off to that carburetor. Now, some tanks, like the DR that's out here, has up on the bottom of the tank a fuel shut off already, so you don't need one to put in line as long as that one up there is working. And what we tell our customers is let the piece of equipment run until it runs out of fuel. Let it burn the fuel that's in the carburetor, because you don't want that ethanol gas sitting in that carburetor for long periods of time, because it will varnish, it will gum it up, it will eat your rubbers, and you will be buying a new carburetor because it also affects the inside structure of the aluminum. There's not much you can do for the two-stroke unless it's the oil injection, which then you have your gas separate, like on your outboards. You simply unhook the gas and let it run itself out, so it cleans everything out of the carburetors and stuff. Years ago, when I was doing a lot of snowmobiling and stuff, we used to use foggers, and towards the end of the season, we would just have it running and then spray the fog right in through the carburetor into the cylinder, so it over lubricated everything, so that we knew it was going to sit for a while. The worst thing you can do is let it sit dry or have moisture where the rings would seize up and quit working. Alright, so long-term storage is, please try not to have any more gas than needed in those tanks. Have a fuel shut-off available. Shut the fuel off. Allow that machine to run until it completely runs out of fuel, because she will burn what's in the carburetor and to your shut-off. That will all come down in and it'll run out, and when it runs out, you're good. The additives that are out there today, what works and what doesn't work. I'll tell you, it's kind of like a snake oil salesman on some of these products, because they don't work. My mechanic and I hate when you stick your hand in to some gas that you're trying to work on and you pull your hand out and it's all white, or it just evaporated and it was so dry that instead of buying all these additives, just simply do what I explained. And maybe you guys have other ways too, but I haven't seen any of the additives that were really that great do everything they said they would do. I've yet to see an additive out there that could take a year-old or 2-year-old gasoline and make it fresh again. It's not happening. You've already got moisture, you got water. Now you're adding something that's going to try to dilute the water. We used to use dry gas, is how we, in vehicles, we carry it right with us, because the good chances are at one point or another you were going to end up with a frozen line if you lived in the North Country. So what we used to do on a regular basis was we would pour a can of dry gas into the fuel tank every time we filled up, because storage from your service centers tended to have a little bit of water here and there. Well, what additives are you guys out there recommending to your customers, or maybe you homeowners? What additives are you using that you feel is doing best by you? I would really like to know, because the stuff that we've had has not done what it says it could do. And those machines, after doing all the stuff that the additive company said it would do, is now sitting in front of us having to get fixed, because they might have been better off by not adding the additive. So you other shops out there, and you guys that are homeowners, let me know what you've tried and what works for you. We've tried a lot of the stable products. That seems to be, they got their eye on the ball, but they aren't all what they're cracked up to be. And then lastly, what I thought I would talk about is, what are you guys doing with your old equipment? And when I say old equipment, here at the shop, we end up, it just kind of magically appears, more and more lawnmowers, push mowers, weed eaters, what have you, up in what we call the boneyard. Now, where the shop is, we're sitting on just under 3 acres of ground. So we've got roughly around 2 acres of space. And you don't want it where it's going to be an eyesore. I don't like it being an eyesore. So we end up with the 2 acres out in behind the shop where people can't see it from the road is where the older machines get dragged to, or ones that customers have told us that they no longer wanted. Could we take it? And we've had people we've never dealt with before call and ask if we were be willing to take their old lawnmower because they just bought a new one at Lowe's. And I always tell them, yeah, go ahead. If you want to drop it off, that's fine. And if it's a newer machine, we'll go pick it up. Now, we do a couple things with them. One is if we can take 3 machines and make one good one and make a few bucks flipping it, we will do that. As long as it's the same engine that we're replacing, or the same deck, or the same hydrostatic transmission, we don't mix and match. We don't make Frankensteins, as I call them. And a Frankenstein is just simply one that comes in with a motor that was never originally meant to be on that machine. Or a deck that you worked over to with welding and everything else to try to make work. The other thing that we do with it is we do use used parts in the shop, but the customer is told this is what a new one costs. This is what I got on a price for a used one. It's up to you totally what you want to do. And the biggest things are usually tires and rims, seats, decks, transmissions, engines, starters. But after a while, you start getting more and more machines that are missing parts. And it's starting to get looking like, a junkyard. So what do you guys do? What I do is about every 3 to 4 years, a friend of mine, he's into the scrap iron business. And I just give him a shout, check, see what the price of metal is. And as it steadily gets up there, what I end up doing is calling him and telling him, all right, why don't you come up with your dumpsters? And he has tractor trailers. Come on up. And they're usually running a full-size excavator and a mini and a front-end loader. And they will go up and clean our whole boneyard right out. They'll take what I ask them to take. And the better stuff, I'll hold back to one side. But with that gives extra income into the shop that you didn't have before. My mechanic commented the last time is we've hardly had too many people have been asking for used parts until they see the dumpsters being loaded out front. And then they're clamoring for used parts, used decks, and this and that. We do keep all the good used decks. We do keep all the good used starters. Any of the good seats, especially John Deere, we keep them. Put them in storage inside. Any of the John Deere hoods that are made of fiberglass that are in really good shape, we'll store those. But everything else goes for scrap. One of our competitors, but they're good friends, one of the things that they do is they have a steel Husqvarna, Mahindra, and they're into everything. And they've got crates right full of carburetors for two-stroke. Their mainstay was always chainsaw. And what they figured out, and what I figured out, it was cheaper for the customer to just have a guy swap out carburetors, put a new one in, than it was to kit it. he went that way. So then he started ending up with these totes right full of used carburetors, and they're all basically aluminum. And he was asking me what I did with my stuff, so I told him, and he started doing that now too, where he sorts his aluminum, and they use that for Christmas bonuses and turkeys for the employees, at Thanksgiving, and a little extra bonus for him and his family. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Excuse me. What are you guys doing with your waste oil and contaminated gas? How do you guys long-term storage anything? What kind of additives are you using that are working well and ones that you don't think are working well? And lastly, what do you do with your boneyard? I know probably a lot of you guys that are in the city don't have a lot of space anyways, but on that note, you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching.